The first time my dad told me I was too mentally unstable for visitors, I was 15 years old, pregnant with my brother's baby, and trapped in a house that felt more like a prison than a home. He looked me right in the eyes, the same eyes people in Greenville used to say made him such a trustworthy cop, and said, "The system protects its own." That was his way of telling me no one was coming. No rescue. No justice. Just silence. But silence never came naturally to me. My brother's name is Caleb, and when I was 14, he stole everything from me in one night I still can't erase. I'd been sick for weeks with mono, too weak to get out of bed most days. Around midnight he came into my room, smelling like chlorine from swim practice, smirking like he was about to tell a joke. But his words weren't funny. "You've really grown up, Harper," he whispered. "I need practice before college, and you're perfect." At first, I didn't even understand what was happening. Feverish, half asleep, my body heavy like lead. But by the time I realized, it was already too late. When it was over, Caleb smoothed my sweaty hair back like he was being tender, and leaned down so close I could feel his breath on my ear. "No one will ever believe you." I stayed in the shower until the water ran ice cold, my skin raw from scrubbing. Then I stumbled down the hall, dripping wet, shaking so bad I could barely stand, and woke my parents. For 1 second, just one, I thought they'd hold me, protect me, tell me it wasn't my fault. Instead, my mom's first words were, "You can't mess up his swimming scholarship." It was his senior year. Scouts were coming around. Dad reminded me that Caleb was their retirement plan. Olympic swimmers made millions, after all. They made me repeat what happened over and over, picking apart my words like detectives searching for holes in a suspect's alibi. Finally, Dad leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his uniform, and said, "If it was that bad, why didn't you stop him? Maybe you wanted it." Mom was crying, but not for me. She sobbed about how I was going to ruin the family. How selfish I was. By sunrise, they'd convinced themselves it was just a misunderstanding. Caleb wasn't a predator. I was just dramatic. They made me promise never to mention it again. But I've never been the quiet type. I thought maybe I could report him at school. I told the resource officer during lunch, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold my tray. But instead of writing anything down, he just picked up the phone. I'll never forget the way his voice turned casual, almost amused. "Mike, your girl's telling stories again." That night, Dad sat me down. His badge gleamed in the kitchen light. He spoke calmly, like he was teaching me some unspoken rule of adulthood. "Any report you make? It'll come to me first. My buddies will always call me before anyone else. That's how the system works. The system protects its own." That was the night I realized he wasn't just ignoring what Caleb did. He was actively protecting him. So I got creative. I wrote everything in my English journal, the one teacher swore was confidential. I poured every detail onto those pages, praying my teacher would finally see me. She did. She called my parents for a conference. And they convinced her I was just writing fiction, imaginative stories for attention. That night, my bedroom door was gone. They unscrewed it from the hinges, carried it away like they were moving furniture. Mom stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Privacy is earned with trust," she said. Behind her, Caleb smirked like he'd won a prize. The more I tried to fight back, the tighter they pulled the leash. I went to the counselor. Suddenly, Mom and Dad were volunteering at my school every day, intercepting my attempts to talk. The counselor stopped seeing me as a victim and started calling me a creative genius. My laptop disappeared. My phone vanished. Even the house phone had a lock code I didn't know. So if they were going to call me a genius, I decided to act like one. At Caleb's swim meets, they forced me to hold up signs cheering for him. I made them look supportive, but the first letters of each word spelled out "Help me." No one noticed. At family dinners, I tapped SOS in Morse code on the table. My uncles laughed about how quirky I was. No one ever looked deeper. One by one, my escape routes vanished. They pulled me from dance, saying Caleb's career came first. Friends stopped calling after my parents told them I needed space. My world shrank until it was just school, swim meets, and the four walls of that doorless bedroom. And then, the morning I woke up vomiting, Mom didn't even look surprised. She just bought the tests. When they came back positive, she didn't ask if I was okay. She called Dad. "We've got a situation." That evening, they laid out the plan. I'd be sent away to boarding school, though really I'd be hidden at home until the baby was born. Everyone would believe I'd been knocked up by some boy from dance class. Caleb's reputation would stay intact. Caleb crouched next to me, his hand resting on my stomach. His smile was pure victory. "Now you'll never get away from me. We're connected forever." That was the moment the fight drained out of me. My father, a cop, had built a cage I couldn't break out of. My mother had chosen her son over her daughter. And my brother had made sure I'd carry his secret inside me every single day. I thought I'd already hit rock bottom. But that wasn't the worst of it. Not even close. After the pregnancy test, my parents treated me less like a daughter and more like a liability they had to manage. Mom brought meals to my room on a tray, watching every bite like she was a prison guard. She even smoothed my hair sometimes, but her touch felt like ice, rehearsed, like she was checking a box on some twisted to-do list. Dad went further. He installed a baby monitor in my room, the kind that streamed video straight to his phone. "It's for your safety," he said, but the way his eyes lingered told me it was for control. Caleb, meanwhile, was thriving in his role as the family's golden boy. He leaned against my doorframe every chance he got, arms crossed, smirk painted on his face. Sometimes he left baby name books on my nightstand with certain pages marked, always named starting with C. His way of reminding me that I belonged to him, that the baby belonged to him, that I would never escape. Homeschooling began soon after. Mom created a strict schedule: math at 9 o'clock, science at 10:30, history after lunch, every hour scripted like she was running a military camp. She even monitored my bathroom breaks. The windows in my room got new locks, the kind you needed a key for on both sides. My world shrank from small to microscopic. At first, I tried to comply. I was so exhausted, from morning sickness, from crying when no one could hear, from pretending I wasn't breaking. Some mornings, I couldn't even stand without my legs shaking. But instead of sympathy, Mom would hand me worksheets, talking about lesson plans like I was just a lazy student faking sick. Dad's schedule shifted too. If he wasn't home, Mom was. If she went out, he took over. They tag-teamed my captivity with frightening precision. Even their arguments seemed rehearsed, conducted in low voices behind closed doors, as if they knew any hint of discord might give me hope. And yet, for all their control, I began noticing cracks. Small ones. Mom's hand shook when she gave me prenatal vitamins. Dad drank more with dinner, his words slurring by the third beer. And Caleb, for all his arrogance, started glancing over his shoulder more often, like maybe the weight of his lies was catching up. One afternoon during biology, I asked Mom casual questions about genetics, eye color, blood types, inheritance. She answered flatly until I brought up DNA testing. Her face went pale, the kind of pale you can't fake. She slammed the textbook shut and left the room without a word. That night, all the science books disappeared from the house. That was when I realized I couldn't fight openly anymore. Every rebellion only tightened their grip. So I started small. Tiny acts of defiance they couldn't quite punish. Moving my furniture an inch each day, enough to make my room feel subtly different. Humming nonsense tunes during meals until Mom's eye twitched. Writing answers in smaller and smaller handwriting until she had to squint to grade them. It wasn't escape, not yet. It was survival. Proof that I still had pieces of myself left. Doctor visits were the worst. Mom had arranged for a family friend to do house calls. He examined me in my room while she stood guard. Not once did he ask the questions a real doctor should ask a pregnant 15-year-old. He never looked me in the eye. Afterward, he and Dad would talk quietly about his son applying to the police academy. Another favor traded. Another escape route locked. Meanwhile, Caleb grew bolder. At family dinners, he'd rest his hand on my stomach, pretending to be the proud uncle. Mom would beam. Dad would nod approvingly. They'd crafted a narrative so airtight that outsiders saw nothing but a devoted brother stepping up to support his troubled sister. I started to believe no one would ever see the truth. Until one humid evening in May, when Caleb stumbled home from practice scratching at angry red patches on his shoulders. Pool chemicals, he muttered while Mom fussed over him with aloe vera. He kept prescription creams in his bathroom. Small detail, but it stuck in my mind like a seed. Pregnancy made them careless in new ways. They saw my exhaustion, my swollen ankles, and assumed physical weakness meant surrender. Mom started leaving me alone during her nightly showers, trusting locked windows to keep me contained. Dad stopped checking the monitor as obsessively once he'd had a few beers. Their vigilance slipped. I began testing boundaries. Slowly. Quietly. Practicing moving without creaking the floorboards. Mapping which doors opened silently. Checking window frames, memorizing which locks were loosest. Not to run yet. Just to know. Knowledge was the only power I had left, and I clung to it. The first real victory came with a baby monitor. I discovered a blind spot, the tiny sliver of space by my closet where the camera couldn't see me. I started sitting there, invisible for the first time in months. It wasn't much. But it was mine. Caleb noticed my compliance too. He grew cockier, whispering about our baby when parents weren't listening, brushing against me in hallways, watching me with that same smirk. Each violation, I filed away in my mind, a growing list of evidence for a trial I wasn't sure would ever come. Then the cracks widened. One night, I heard my parents arguing, real arguing, not their hushed, careful fights. Dad's voice thundered. Mom's cracked with desperation. Caleb had failed a drug test at a swim meet. Marijuana. Nothing huge, but enough to put his scholarship at risk. The golden boy had stained his own halo. The next morning, the tension was palpable. Dad lectured him about responsibility. Mom fussed, trying to smooth things over. Caleb sulked. For the first time, I saw the shine of their perfect son dim. I kept my face neutral, spooning oatmeal into my mouth like nothing had changed. But inside, something flickered. A spark I hadn't felt in months. If Caleb could fail, if their golden plan could crack, maybe I wasn't as trapped as I thought. I didn't know it then, but that tiny spark would change everything. When Caleb failed that first drug test, I saw something in my parents' faces I'd never seen before, a doubt. Not much, just a flicker. But enough to tell me their perfect story wasn't airtight anymore. It reminded me of something from years earlier, a memory I hadn't thought about in forever. I was 9, and I'd been accused of stealing a bracelet from Mom's dresser. I didn't take it, but Caleb swore he'd seen me wearing it. Dad grilled me for an hour, his voice sharp, Mom's arms folded tight. I begged them to believe me, tears soaking my shirt. Finally, Dad sighed and told me that Caleb wouldn't lie about something like that. They grounded me for a month. A week later, I found the bracelet in Caleb's swim bag. He'd planted the lie just to see if I'd break. When I told Dad, he just chuckled. "Boys will be boys," he said. "Learn to pick your battles, Harper." That was the day I learned Caleb's word would always outweigh mine. And now, years later, I saw history repeating itself, but this time, it wasn't a bracelet. It was his entire future. The scholarship board demanded more drug tests. Weekly. Supervised. Dad called in every favor he had to smooth things over, but the pressure was mounting. Mom was researching appeal processes late into the night. Caleb was pacing the halls like a caged animal, snapping at anyone who spoke to him. And me? I finally had space to breathe. With their focus split between salvaging Caleb's reputation and controlling me, their vigilance weakened. Mom left me alone longer during her online grocery sessions. Dad stopped double-checking the monitor feed. Caleb was too busy sulking to linger in my doorway. For the first time in months, I had minutes, sometimes whole hours, where no one was watching. I used them. The toilet paper notes I'd been scribbling in secret grew into a hidden archive. Dates, times, patterns, every detail etched in tiny letters and hidden in the closet blind spot. It was my evidence file, the case no one else would build for me. At dinners, I became the perfect actress. I asked questions about Caleb's training schedule, Dad's shifts, Mom's volunteer hours. They answered eagerly, proud of my renewed family interest, never realizing I was building a map of their lives outside the house. And then I discovered Caleb's real weakness. One Thursday, he came home from practice scratching at his arms, muttering about chlorine. He disappeared into the bathroom for nearly half an hour. Later, I snuck in while Mom was cooking dinner. His prescription cream sat on the counter, his name on the label. My heart raced as I copied the details onto a scrap of toilet paper. It wasn't much, but it was something. Proof that he wasn't invincible. Proof he had flaws. The adoption plan was the next crack. I first noticed it when Mom left paperwork on the counter by accident. A private adoption agency. Closed records. She wanted me to see it, to know she'd already planned for the baby to vanish. I memorized everything. The agency's name. The contact info. Even the fee schedule. If nothing else, those details would live in my head like ammunition. That night, while Mom slept, I sat in my blind spot with my hand on my stomach. The baby kicked for the first time, a flutter that made me gasp. For a split second, I forgot everything. But then Mom's footsteps creaked in the hall, and the moment soured. This baby wasn't mine, not in their eyes. It was leverage. Another chain. Still, something inside me shifted. The same stubbornness that kept me from confessing to Caleb's bracelet lie years ago started to pulse again. I began testing more than locks. I tested them. When Caleb left for practice, I slipped into his room. I didn't take anything, not yet. I just moved things. His goggles from his dresser to his desk. His protein powder from one shelf to another. Tiny shifts that made him snap at Mom, accusing her of touching his things. She denied it, confused. Their united front fractured in small, delicious cracks. Every argument they had became fuel. Every slip of control, a spark. 6 blocks away, my old dance teacher Mrs. Klein still lived in the same yellow house with the rose bushes. From my window, I could see the route, past the church, across the park, down the quiet street. It might as well have been 600 miles with the locks and the surveillance. But knowing she was there, so close, kept me alive. The real turning point came 2 weeks later. Caleb failed another test. This time, it wasn't marijuana. It was Adderall. Dad went purple with rage. Mom cried like her son had died. Caleb ranted about unfair rules, how everyone used it. But the scholarship board wasn't laughing. His future dangled by a thread. And for once, mine didn't. The house descended into chaos. Tutors, counseling sessions, community service hours, all crammed into Caleb's schedule to make him look reformed. My parents' obsession with saving him meant they left me alone longer. Mom stopped checking my assignments. Dad stopped locking every drawer. I used every spare minute. Practiced picking locks with bobby pins stolen from Mom's vanity. The bathroom surrendered first. Then the hall closet. I didn't escape, not yet. But every click of a lock felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. At night, Caleb started haunting my doorway again. He didn't touch me, not then. Just whispered about our baby, about names, about how he'd visit it even if it went to Oregon or Maine. He believed no matter what happened, I'd never escape him. But he was wrong. Because for the first time in over a year, I wasn't just surviving. I was planning. By the time I was 7 months pregnant, I thought I'd memorized every beat of my captivity, the sound of Mom's slippers in the hall, the exact creak of the stairwell under Dad's boots, the way Caleb's shadow stretched across my bedroom wall when he leaned in the doorway. But I hadn't planned for Alexandra. My aunt. Mom's sister. The one they'd cut off years ago for being nosy and too liberal. I used to call her Aunt Alex. She'd braid my hair in French plaits and bring me sparkly notebooks for dance class. Then one year she just vanished. At least, that's what I thought. Now she was suddenly back, because my parents wanted her to take the baby. I learned the truth crouched in my blind spot, ear pressed to the thin wall that separated my room from theirs. Mom's voice was tight, sharp. A stranger adoption is too risky. If Alex takes her, it stays in the family. No questions. No paper trail. Dad resisted at first. He hated Alex, always had. But Mom was relentless. Family is easier to control. Those words chilled me. Control. That was all I was to them. Alex agreed, but she had conditions. One in particular, she wanted to meet me first. Alone. Mom tried to refuse. Alex held firm. No meeting, no adoption. I'd almost forgotten how stubborn she could be. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon. Mom fussed for hours beforehand, checking my clothes, my pockets, even my mouth as if I'd be hiding contraband. She finally left me in the living room, sitting stiffly on the couch like a criminal awaiting judgment. When Alex walked in, time folded in on itself. She looked older, streaks of grey in her hair, laugh lines deeper, but her eyes were the same. Sharp. Seeing everything. She hugged Mom politely, then turned to me. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. 15 years old. 7 months pregnant. Her face stayed neutral, but I saw the flash of horror she tried to hide. We sat in the living room while Mom hovered by the kitchen doorway, close enough to hear every word. Alex asked harmless questions, how school was going, if I liked reading, if I had baby names picked. I answered carefully. Yes. Fine. No. But my hands told a different story. Because years ago, Alex had taught me something my parents never knew, basic sign language. A summer game we'd whispered and giggled through in her backyard. I hadn't practiced in years, but desperation sharpens memory. While my mouth gave polite answers, my fingers moved casually in my lap. Help. Caleb. Mom. Dad. Trap. Alex didn't flinch. Didn't react at all. Just brushed her hair back, adjusted her purse, shifted her bracelet, her own subtle signs. I understand. Be ready. For the first time in months, I felt seen. An hour later, she hugged me goodbye, lips brushing my ear. Thursday. 4 o'clock. 2 days. That was all the time I had to prepare. Thursday was Caleb's drug test day. Dad had to drive him. Mom would be home, distracted with her online shopping. A 2-hour window. Alex had given me a sliver of possibility, and I clutched it like a lifeline. I condensed my toilet paper notes into one sheet, names, dates, the ugliest truths in the smallest handwriting I could manage. I folded it flat and hid it inside my bra. If I got only one chance, it had to count. Thursday arrived grey and drizzling. Caleb stormed out with his swim bag. Dad followed. Mom retreated to her bedroom with her laptop. The house went quiet. At 4:15, I made my move. I went to the bathroom, routine enough not to raise suspicion. The window lock had always been loose. I'd tested it dozens of times, but never forced it. Now, wrapping my hand in a towel, I shoved. Once. Twice. A loud creak. My heart pounded in my ears. Another push, and the lock popped free. Cold rain hit my face. The drop was 8 feet. My stomach twisted, the baby, the risk, but staying wasn't safer. I squeezed through the frame, belly scraping, fingers clinging to the sill. Then I let go. The impact rattled my bones, but I stayed upright. No pain beyond the jolt. Just adrenaline. Just rain. At the corner of the street, hazard lights blinked. A car idled. Alex behind the wheel, eyes frantic. I ran, or waddled, really, across the wet grass, every step a prayer that Mom wouldn't look up from her laptop. The passenger door opened. I threw myself inside. Before I'd even shut it, Alex was driving, tires splashing through puddles. The house, my prison, disappeared in the rearview mirror. I was out. I don't remember much of the drive. Just rain streaking the windows, Alex's jaw tight with focus, my own hand shaking around that folded piece of evidence. When she finally pulled into a deserted parking lot, she turned to me. For the first time since walking into that house, she dropped her mask. Her face crumpled. She pulled me into a hug, fierce and protective, and I broke. Sobs ripped through me, months of silence spilling into her shoulder. When I could finally breathe again, I pressed the folded sheet into her hand. She read it quickly. Her face went pale. Then her expression hardened into something I'd never seen before, a rage sharpened into resolve. "We're not going back," she said. "Not ever." She already had a plan. A motel 2 towns over, paid in cash. A lawyer friend. A safe house if needed. She'd been preparing for years, waiting for a crack in their armor. My dad had said the system protects its own. He was right. But what he didn't know was that Alex was my system. The motel Alex drove us to that night smelled faintly of bleach and cigarette smoke, but to me it smelled like freedom. 2 beds. A bathroom with a door that locked. A window I could open if I wanted. After months of being monitored like a prisoner, I didn't know what to do with space. We didn't stay long. By morning, Dad and Mom were calling non-stop, voicemails full of threats disguised as concern. "You're confused, Harper. Come home before you make things worse." Then Dad's cop buddies started circling the motel. We had to move. Alex already had a backup plan, a friend's cabin an hour north. Secluded, off the grid. The cabin became our refuge. No locks on the windows. No cameras. Just trees and silence. I slept for days, my body finally crashing after months of running on fear. When I woke, Alex had already contacted her lawyer friend, Theo, who specialized in family law. He listened carefully as I told him everything, never interrupting, never doubting. For the first time, my words weren't twisted or dismissed. They were recorded, documented, made real. Theo filed for emergency custody. By the end of the week, Alex had full legal guardianship. My parents were barred from coming within 500 feet. For once, Dad's badge couldn't shield him. But custody was just the beginning. The trial that followed stretched for months. My evidence, those toilet paper notes, the adoption paperwork, the testimony from Alex, from teachers, even from my old best friend Natalie, built a case so damning that even Dad's 20 years of connections couldn't patch the holes. I testified by video, too pregnant to face them in person. I sat in that cabin with a camera pointed at me, my hand resting on my swollen stomach, and told the court everything. The night Caleb came into my room. The way Mom begged me not to ruin his scholarship. The way Dad dismantled every escape I tried to build. The defense tried to paint me as delusional, jealous, mentally unstable. But then came the DNA test. Cold, clinical numbers that tied Caleb to the baby growing inside me. The jury stared at the printout in silence. Caleb's smirk, the one I'd grown up seeing, slipped for the first time. Mom broke on the stand, sobbing about mistakes and misunderstandings, but the details betrayed her. Dad tried to stay stone-faced, but even he couldn't explain away the baby monitor, the removed bedroom door, the intercepted reports. The system he trusted to protect him was finally turning against him. On the third day of deliberations, the jury returned. Caleb, guilty of aggravated sexual assault, child endangerment, and false imprisonment. Dad, guilty of conspiracy and misconduct. Mom, guilty of child neglect and aiding cover-up. The sentences came a month later. Caleb got 25 years. Dad got 10. Mom got 5, with the chance of parole. I didn't attend sentencing. I stayed home in the cabin, clutching my newborn daughter against my chest. I named her Grace, because surviving what I did felt like nothing short of grace. For months, I wondered if I'd even be able to love her, knowing who her father was. But the moment they laid her on my chest in that hospital, screaming and perfect, all I felt was fierce protection. She wasn't him. She wasn't theirs. She was mine. The years that followed weren't easy, but they were ours. I finished high school online. Started college classes. Became a social worker, determined to help other kids trapped in homes like mine. Alex raised Grace alongside me, our little family stitched together out of survival and stubborn love. Meanwhile, Mom wrote letters from prison, apologies mixed with excuses. Dad sent justifications, claiming the system had betrayed him. Caleb sent threats. I didn't respond to any of them. Alex kept the letters in a box marked evidence, never letting them near me. 5 years after my escape, I stood in court again, but this time, not as a victim. I was testifying on behalf of another girl, one whose stepfather had tried the same tricks my dad had. As I spoke, I realized my voice didn't shake anymore. Grace sat in the back row, swinging her legs, her curls bouncing as she giggled with Alex. That was the moment I knew the cycle was broken. Because the worst betrayal of my life wasn't just what Caleb did or what my parents allowed. It was the way they tried to convince me I didn't matter. That my words were lies. That my future was worthless compared to his. But I survived. And every time Grace laughs, every time I walk out my own front door without asking permission, every time I choose my life, I prove them wrong. They thought they'd silence me. But all they did was give me a story no one will ever forget.